Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com. And this week, I'm happy to introduce a very special guest on the show. I always say that, but today I feel it's extra special since we have a fellow Canadian, Jonathan Rigby, who is the CEO of Sernova, which is a Canadian biotech company developing innovative cell therapy-based approaches for the management of type 1 diabetes. Sernova's lead innovation is an implantable biohybrid organ pouch, which is currently in an ongoing phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial. Now, an estimated 537 million people are currently living with diabetes globally, and this number is projected to reach 643 million by 2030, making it a pressing health issue in need of new and effective treatment options and solutions. Now, prior to heading Sernova as its CEO, Jonathan Rigby served as president and CEO of Revolo Biotherapeutics, where he took the company through multiple financings and 2 phase 2 clinical trials. And he also served as chairman and chief business officer of Bios Acquisition Corporation with an oversold IPO. Jonathan has served in various leadership positions throughout his career at several other biopharmaceutical companies as well. He currently serves on the board of directors of cancer therapy company Oncolytics Biotech as well, and Biotherapeutics, which is developing therapies for type 1 diabetes as well, just as Sernova is. Jonathan holds a degree in biological sciences from the University of Sheffield, UK, and has a Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Portsmouth, UK. To hear more about the exciting work in the field in this type 1 diabetes space, let's turn to Jonathan now. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Ayesha, thank you so much for having me. Well, it's nice to be called a special guest. That doesn't happen to me very often, so thank you for that. And you mentioned there are 537 million people with diabetes. Was that right?
Yes. And I, from my research in the space, and of course, getting a lot of that information from Sernova, what can you tell us about, this number? I mean, it just seems like a number, but it's staggering.
Well, I am one of those 537 million people with diabetes. So this is a subject that is very close to my heart and even more close to my pancreas. So I've worked in the field of diabetes on and off for over 30 years, and I feel incredibly passionate about doing my part to help people suffering with this condition. And that's why I joined Sernova, candidly.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Jonathan, that very personal angle and that personal story and connection that you really have to the work you're doing, of course, for patients. And that includes yourself. So I think that really brings everything home. And so thank you so much for that. And I'd like to ask you what really brought you to Sernova, of course, in addition to your personal story, and what really motivates you to lead and to develop innovative therapies in this space, and also touching on what the unmet medical needs, I think, first are in type 1 diabetes. I think we look at diabetes as a chronic condition, just that it can be managed. People live with it forever, but really there is a lot of scope for innovation. And I think a lot of people might sometimes forget that, although with the explosion of GLP-1 agonists for type 2 diabetes, that has kind of brought diabetes back to the forefront or in the spotlight. But what can you tell us about the current unmet medical needs and where diabetes is at, both from a clinical perspective from the patient, as you yourself are, and on the research end of things?
Yeah, I mean, diabetes, because there are 537 million people with diabetes, is kind of a a ubiquitous disease. Everybody knows about it. Almost everybody knows somebody that has diabetes. So I actually think it's a little bit misunderstood. People think, well, what's the problem? We have insulin, we have blood glucose meters, we now have continuous glucose meters. We fixed it. And that is a fallacy, candidly. We give patients insulin, but to achieve normal glycemic control, a normal pancreas, like what I assume you have, produces insulin, which lowers blood sugar. It produces glucagon, which raises blood sugar when your sugar is coming down to a dangerous low level. And you have a hormone called somatostatin that regulates both of these hormones. And it really upsets me to talk about medical need here, because let's be honest, we are nowhere near having met the needs of treating this disease and this condition. People with diabetes, I'm pretty disciplined in looking after myself, but a lot of people are not. Pretty rapidly, they can go lose their eyesight. They can go blind. I personally have terrible eyesight that's deteriorating over time. They can get liver disease. They can get kidney disease. They get peripheral neuropathy, which sometimes leads to amputation. They have heart disease, and frighteningly so, 1 in 10 people with type 1 diabetes can have severe hypoglycemia. 1 in 10, and so 1 in 10 of people can do die from severe hypoglycemia. So we've got to fix this problem, and that's what we're aiming to do here at Sernova.
Indeed, I think all of those things that you mentioned, I think it's a misconception that we're okay with everything in diabetes and we've solved the problem. It's far from that. And so thank you so much for, again, sharing your story and for the work that you're doing at Sernova. And so could you tell us a bit about really your journey to Sernova? You've been in the biopharmaceutical and biotechnology industry for many years. And so what finally led you to Sernova?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question, Ayesha. So I am, as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm a biologist. So I do love science, and I've been in the industry for north of 30 years now. I started my career working for Big Pharma. I grew up in the UK. I worked for Big Pharma for almost a decade. And then over 20 years ago, I relocated to California, to the Bay Area, and worked for a company that was working in collaboration with Novo Nordisk on inhaled insulin to treat diabetes. So, that's where my work in diabetes started. And what do I love about this industry? I love developing medicines for sick people. And I say that with genuine sincerity. I've developed medicines for people suffering from pulmonary hypertension. Not me alone, of course, me being part of wonderful teams. Pulmonary hypertension is a disease that kills people. We've developed and launched drugs for cystic fibrosis, which is another terrible disease that unfortunately takes the lives of many innocent people. And then, I moved on from working on inhaled insulin and working in pulmonary hypertension and taken several companies public, several of them being acquired. A CNS company that I co-founded called Zogenix. We got 2 drugs approved there, and one of them for a disease called Dravet syndrome, which is a rare epilepsy. And that company was acquired. And then, I worked also for a company called Xeris Pharmaceuticals for a while. And Xeris developed the world's first liquid stable glucagon injection for severe hypoglycemia. So that, again, gives me a lot of satisfaction. And one of those injectable pens sits by my bedside cabinet, and hopefully I don't have to use it. But that really, really gets me excited. And I learned about Sernova earlier this year, and it really, really caught my attention. because our cell pouch biohybrid organ platform, which we can get into a little bit more detail on, really has shown some very, very promising data in a phase 1, phase 2 safety and efficacy trial, where we've shown people getting insulin independence, so controlling their blood sugar without the need for externally injected insulin. That thrills me, that one day I can hopefully look back when we get this product approved and say, I played my part, a little part in providing a functional cure for type 1 diabetes.
Indeed. And that, being at the forefront at Sernova and leading that's huge. And so I'd like to learn a bit more about the company's lead therapeutic product, which you mentioned is a cell pouch. And so could you tell us about what it is, its design, and how it works?
I can, and I have a prop. So this is actually what the cell pouch looks like.
Wow, that's so cool. You know what? For some reason, I was imagining it as a bigger kind of, I don't know what I was imagining, but my apologies. But that's very neat. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they so this is the pouch itself. This is made from a porous, surgically implantable mesh. Here you see the white rods. Inside here there are chambers, there are channels. What happens? The surgeon will implant the cell pouch beneath the skin of your abdomen, but above your muscle fascia. And then over a period of about 4 to 6 weeks, it becomes highly vascularized. So blood vessels grow around it, they grow in it. And then that means you essentially are creating a living ecosystem. And then once that has happened, the surgeon will just do a small incision, will then insert, at the moment we are using islet cells from human donors. In the future, we do plan on shifting over to iPSC islet-like clusters that are being developed currently by our partner Biotherapeutics in Germany. So these cells then flourish, they start to produce insulin, they start to produce glucagon, they then start to produce somatostatin. And in fact, we have data from one of the patients in our trials that was insulin independent for more than 4 years. And we can take these pouches out should the need arise. And with one patient who'd had a pouch in for over 5 years, we explanted that pouch and conducted a histological examination. And we found that there were still abundant cells producing, again, insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. So, we believe that's a first in the world. And, we're very encouraged by data like that as we move the program forwards.
That is so exciting. That's so elegant in terms of you have this pouch and it's delivering cells. And so do the cells populate in the pancreas eventually, or is that the idea?
No, they stay
in the pouch. Okay, so they're delivering, though, the hormones. Those are being...
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and having them stay in the pouch is actually quite important. We're on the cutting edge here of developing this product, and we're looking at other diseases where, cell therapy is relevant, like thyroid disease. But should something go wrong, then, having the ability to retrieve the pouch and cells, we believe is a strong differentiator and a distinct advantage for what we're doing at Sernova.
Right. And so would you call this is in essence a type of cell therapy, but it's not quite your traditional cell therapy that you might think of?
I think you are correct in saying that. But when we move over to the stem cell islet-like clusters with our partner at Biotherapeutics, then we're firmly and squarely in the field of regenerative cell therapy care.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think I've come across such a product. And so what really sets Sernova's approach apart from other companies in the diabetes space? And what do you say that they're mostly focused on, and what really sets Sernova apart, which I can really see how Sernova sets itself apart. But how do you see Sernova's innovation in the field and for its potential to truly be very groundbreaking?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at current therapy, which consists of, injectable insulin, which can be injected by a needle and a syringe, or auto-injector, a pre-filled auto-injector, or like myself, delivered with a subcutaneous insulin infusion pump. And so again, when if I have a meal, my blood sugar will spike, and I will need to give myself insulin from my pump. And very often it goes above a normal level. I go into hyperglycemia. And then all of a sudden, sometimes for unpredictable reasons, my blood sugar will come plummeting down. And the pump via the continuous glucose meter will turn the insulin delivery off to try and prevent me going into severe hypoglycemia. But that does happen. And in fact, just a couple of months ago, I took my son to his first New York Yankees baseball game. And we had a wonderful time, and we stayed overnight. And then 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, I'm having a serious, pretty severe hyperglycemic attack. And my young son is putting glucose tablets and Coca-Cola in my mouth to try and bring me back out of the hypoglycemia. So this is a serious problem. And, if he hadn't have been there with me, maybe I wouldn't be here speaking to you today. So that's how we currently treat the diabetes. Your question was, why is this different? And so the average diabetic makes about 200 decisions per day about treating their condition. So it's always on your mind. It's always pecking on your brain, always worried about it. Your relatives are worried about it 24 hours a day. Your children are worried about it 24 hours a day. And it's a constant fight against the disease. So if we can get our product approved, you take all of that away. You take away those comorbidities, the blindness, the liver disease, the kidney failure, the heart attacks, the strokes. You take that away, but also you take away that daily worry. In fact, in one of our presentation decks, we have a quote from the patient that was insulin independent for over 4.5 years. And she said how wonderful it was to get her life back on the Sernova therapy. And our only regret was that it hadn't happened sooner. So yeah, we're really giving patients their lives back and liberating them from this horrendous disease.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I don't think we've seen any, I would say, really potentially game-changing innovations, as you mentioned, what the current treatments entail. And so this is truly at the cutting edge of science and patient care. Yeah.
You're based in Toronto, and which is where Banting and Best discovered insulin 101 years ago, as it would happen. And obviously, in 101 years, we've come quite a long way, but we're still relying on, synthesized insulin and monitoring your blood sugar. So we've made a lot of progress. It's, not many years ago, diabetes was a death sentence. And now we can treat the disease, which I'm grateful for. The other 546,999 people are all grateful for. But we've got to work hard and dedicate ourselves here. And ultimately, I look forward to a time in the future when people say, "Oh, do you remember that disease, diabetes? Well, we got rid of that."
That's amazing. And so does this have curative potential, would you say?
Yeah, we call it a functional cure. So, we are not in the business of preventing diabetes. Other people are working on that, and I I applaud them and I hope they'll do it. There are one therapy was approved recently that delays the onset of type 1 diabetes when you screen children who have a genetic disposition to become type 1, and this drug stops them being type 1 for X number of years later than they probably would do. So that's wonderful. And then, people are looking at novel rapid-acting insulins, the more stable insulins, different antibodies to treat the disease, and cell therapy. And we are working on non-embryonic stem cells, which again I believe sets us apart from some other people who are active in the space. And companies like Vertex are working on stem cell therapy for type 1 diabetes, and I wish them the best. If they succeed, we succeed, and everybody succeeds.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And so I'd like to learn a bit more about the clinical data that you have so far. And I know you mentioned some patients and how there was potential for this pouch, this product to be implanted and then eventually removed to really have robust, long-lasting therapeutic and curative potential. And so could you tell us about some of that data, a bit more about where things are at in clinical trials with the product?
Yeah, so this study is an adaptive study. It's a phase 1, phase 2 study. We're looking at efficacy and safety, principally safety at the beginning. And we've divided the study into 3 cohorts. So in the first cohort, we had 6 patients, and all 6 of those patients who had the implanted cells in the cell pouch, they all reached insulin independence. One of the patients is still in that cohort and is about a year now and carrying on. And then other patients went for more than 4 years. One patient, as I mentioned, had functioning islets in their cell pouch that we removed after 5 years. And importantly here, so diabetes control is measured by what we call a HbA1c measure. It's a measure of the glycated hemoglobin in your blood. So a normal person has a range of less than 6.5%. And so all 6 patients in that first cohort got their A1C number to the non-diabetic range, i.e. less than 6.5%. And in this cohort, we were looking at trying to work out what the optimal islet dose is that we put into the cell pouch, and also looking at the density of the islet cells within those chambers that I described. So that was the first cohort. So we did achieve insulin independence. The second cohort, we were looking more closely at optimizing the immune suppression. So these patients at the moment have to have their immune systems suppressed to a level that keeps them safe from infection and other and things such as that. However, we don't want the immune system destroying these cells. So we've had 7 out of the 10 patients in that cohort are being transplanted. The cohort is ongoing, and we were trying to enroll 7 patients, and we asked the FDA if we could increase that number to 10, which they were happy for us to do so. But this is about finding the optimal immune suppression system, the optimized immune suppression regimen for patients on this, and we believe we are there. We plan to complete that cohort in the new year. And then we'll go on to the final cohort, which will probably have about 12 patients. But we'll combine what we learned in the first cohort with what we learned in the second cohort, and it will be confirmatory in nature. And then in parallel with that, we are working with Evotec, a large company based across Europe, but principally in Germany. And they are making these islet-like clusters from induced pluripotent stem cells that we have in preclinical studies right now. And we are showing that those cells also produce insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. And we're showing insulin independence from a mouse model that has induced diabetes for over a year. So all things are coming together very nicely. We still have a way to go, but our confidence in getting there is very high.
Wonderful. Those are really exciting results and data and study design that you have there. It's very, very interesting and a lot to look forward to indeed. And in terms of clinical trials, what are some of the, I guess, people always talk about challenges or I guess obstacles or what are sort of the biggest considerations in clinical trials today in the diabetes space and also in, I guess, this particular space of cell therapy, which I know it's not a full-fledged cell therapy yet, but.
Yeah, I think, Ayesha, the main challenges that we've faced, I think are two main challenges. So, our first trial, our phase 1/2 trial, we are using human donor islet cells. So, it's not easy getting these cells, and you can't control when they arrive at your clinical site, and you cannot control the quality of those cells once they are isolated from the donor pancreas. So, we're working with the University of Chicago. Dr. Witkowski is our lead investigator on the study. And, he's a global expert in doing this. So we're delighted and thrilled to be working with him at his center. So, but getting access to sufficient cells, it's you can't order them from a CRO. You can't go to CVS and buy them. It's not quite so easy. So that's the first challenge. So we are addressing that challenge by working with Evotec to generate the stem cell-derived islet-like clusters, which will all be of the same quality. They'll all be high quality, and they will be in abundant supply. So that's how we fix that one. And then the second issue is candidly immune suppression. We can't have the immune system killing these cells, otherwise it defeats the object. So we're doing a couple of things there. We're looking at, we believe we've optimized the immune suppression regimen, and we're testing that right now in the clinic. So it's well tolerated and allows the cells to thrive and for many, many years. And then in parallel to that, also with our partner at Evotec, we have some early work looking at gene-edited islet cells, which can hopefully one day be implanted in our cell pouch into people with T1D, but the need for immune suppression will be, it won't be there. We're looking at conformal coatings so that we can coat the cells in something that effectively makes them invisible to the immune system. So lots of things going on in parallel, and we are driven and passionate about fixing this.
Indeed. And I think taking it back really to patients like yourself, how do you bring that into the design of clinical trials? I think we hear a lot about terms like patient-centric trials and how to better improve recruitment and retention and all of these terms. But what do they really mean, and how do they pan out when you are designing clinical trials, and specifically in the diabetes space, where I think patients may be accustomed to treatments, lifelong treatments that they've been on, and then how do you sort of navigate introducing, novel concepts and therapies to patients who may be accustomed to a certain type of treatment for years and years?
Yeah, well, these are novel clinical trials, and having the people with the right skill set to be surgically implanting cell therapy is a novel field. So Dr. Witkowski at University of Chicago, he's a luminary in this field. So in the future, we do hope to have other centers. so that we can recruit more patients and people that will know how to do this procedure. Over time, it will become simpler and simpler, that I'm sure. But the good thing here is there are no shortage of patients who want to be rid of this disease. So recruiting patients for us has never been an issue. It's been access to the islet cells, low numbers of centers to conduct the procedure. But we're addressing both of those. And for the final cohort, which will begin in the new year, we will have 2 centers working on the study.
Wonderful. And how do you see the regulatory landscape for this kind of a therapeutic, this kind of a product? We keep seeing a lot of changes in the regulatory space, whether that's the FDA in the US, Health Canada, the EMA in Europe, and especially after COVID, a lot of different pathways, accelerated approval pathways being adopted more readily. And so what is the regulatory landscape like for therapies or in the diabetes space, and where do you and also this innovative product that you have, it kind of bridges a couple of fields, regenerative medicine, cell therapy, and then just diabetes as a whole. So
I mean, I can tell you about Sernova's experience in particular with the FDA. So the trials are in the US, and the FDA have been incredibly helpful and cooperative with us because they understand as well as anybody what this disease does to people, what it's doing to society, what it's doing to the world. And I'll come back onto that in a second. So they've been very cooperative and helpful with approving us to get into the clinic, and we report to them often about where we are, and we have a safety data board. We monitor the study, and again, very cooperative and very helpful. And what a lot of people also don't necessarily understand is that insurance companies are currently incredibly supportive of paying for diabetes therapies. So, people think, oh, you just need your insulin and your glucose monitors. Well, no, not really, because, again, if we use myself as an example, twice a year I go to my eye doctor. I had 3, 4, 5, 6 eye surgeries. Twice a year I go to my endocrinologist. Fortunately, I'm well controlled because I'm pretty disciplined and I keep fit and all of those good things. Twice a year I go to my foot doctor. People have to be treated for heart attacks. People get treated for limb amputations. They get treated for blindness and kidney disease. In fact, there's data showing in, I think, 2022, the cost of treating diabetes. So again, all the things I just mentioned was over $420 billion in 1 year in the United States. So if you average that down, that's well over $250,000 a year. So it's expensive to treat this disease. So insurance companies are quite happy to do what they can to prevent these surgeries, these doctor visits, because ultimately, they pay for them, or the patients pay for them as well. But so it's the cost burden of this disease is also tremendous, and it puts a lot of weight on the healthcare system. And in fact, just yesterday, we made an announcement that we are working towards a collaboration with a life sciences venture capital fund in Germany and the government of Saudi Arabia to develop our cell pouch biohybrid organ to treat type 1 diabetes in Saudi Arabia. In that particular part of the world, 20% of people have type 1 diabetes, and it's growing. So we're going to be working closely with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and probably the broader Gulf states as well, to bring our functional cure to that part of the world, as well as the USA, Canada, Europe, and elsewhere. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. Because I think often we're just so focused on the US or countries in the West, but really this is a global health issue and more pressing in a lot of other countries, in some countries more so than others, but really to really take the trials and to take this product to other countries in the initial phases, I think it's so key and so important. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, people are dying every day from diabetes
Exactly. Everywhere.
Conditions related to the diabetic control. So it's, I mean, and type 1 diabetes is only 10% of the population that has diabetes,
Right.
including type, which is a different condition, but also ultimately leads to the same kind of conditions and mortality.
Right. And the quality of life, I think, is just, there's so much room for improvement there to really help patients to have a better quality of living with this disease, and many people living with it since obviously childhood. And so it's a great burden indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hear of people who I know or who friends know dying of the condition often, and 1 in 10 die from severe hypoglycemia. And somebody with diabetes, and it's a terrifying thought that they may in the morning, they may not come back from work. They may have a terrible accident in the car because of hypoglycemia.
Yeah.
This is a multi-headed gorgon that we're dealing with. We here at Sernova we're battling hard, and we won't stop.
And thank you so much for being engaged in such an important battle. I think, again, this is so game changing, and you yourself understand it very well from both perspectives, as a patient and as a researcher and innovator, entrepreneur in the space. So I think you really are the perfect person to be leading things at Sernova. And in terms of, I guess, when we talk about, I feel like I am talking to someone here who is, again, at the leading edge of advancements and trends in the diabetes space. But are we more so at the cusp of a cure, like at Sernova and the pouch that you're developing there? That seems to be really at that edge. And so, what kinds of trends do you envision and advances in this space in the next couple of years?
Well, I spoke recently to the CEO of Breakthrough T1D. They used to be called the JWRF. They're a big global institution, philanthropic group that they fund clinical trials on many different types of drug products, devices, etc., to treat diabetes. And I asked them, I said, what do you think is the most attractive, best prospect of all these different developments in the field of type 1? And they unequivocally said, we believe it's cell therapy. People have diabetes because their insulin-producing cells, their glucagon-producing cells, the alpha, beta, and delta cells they're dead, especially the beta cells that make the insulin. So what better way to fix this disease is by giving people the cells that they need to replicate a normal non-diabetic glycemic control without thinking about it. It just happens. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. And there are lots of diseases that the biotech, the pharma industry has functionally, effectively cured. And, I see no reason why diabetes one day won't be on that list. And it's a life pleasure to be a part of it.
can only imagine. And again, thank you so much for the important work that you are leading at Sernova with this innovative cell therapy based approach, and really being at the cusp of a cure for this disease, which is very devastating. And I think, again, like how we've been talking about throughout the conversation, that a lot of people sometimes don't realize how deadly indeed type 1 diabetes can be. And so in terms of some of the milestones, I guess, at Sernova, what can we expect to hear from the company in the next couple of months and the next couple of years? I know you have, you mentioned, of course, we talked about the phase 1, phase 2 trial. So what specific milestones and readouts and things can we look forward to?
Yeah, so we are also interested in treating thyroid disease. We expect to be submitting an IND with the FDA in term, and then we hope to get into the clinic with that program next year. But in terms of the diabetes program, we are nearing the back end of concluding the second cohort of 3 cohorts. We expect to have that completed in the first part of next year. And then that will allow us to go into the final confirmatory cohort, which we'll get that hopefully finished by the back end of next year. And then the following year, we'll be moving into the clinic with these iPSC stem cell derived islet-like clusters that are in development with our partner at Evotec. So that will be a big, all of these things are big moments for us. And will we potentially hit roadblocks? It was the first time in my career we don't, but if we hit them, we'll get over them, and that's what we do. And so lots of exciting milestones in the next year and the following years, and ultimately we will go on to getting this product approved and launched broadly across the green planet.
That sounds like a wonderful plan to have. And you mentioned that you're also pursuing, is it the same pouch, the product, pursuing it in thyroid as well, disease? And what other indications, I guess, I forgot that I wanted to ask this as well, that, this innovation can be applied to various diseases, and what types of indications do you have in mind? As you mentioned, you're working already on thyroid disease, and what other indications can this be pursued in?
Yes, we obviously type 1 diabetes, there's potential for this to be used on people with type 2 diabetes as well, producing insulin and need externally injected insulin. So that, opens up a massive market opportunity. As mentioned, we're looking to get into the clinic to treat thyroid disease, and that will be using the same pouch. We have an interest in treating hemophilia, again, using the same pouch. We're not short of opportunities, diseases to treat here. Potentially oncology, wherever you have dysfunctional cells, we potentially have a way of treating those diseases by creating literally, if I could show you a photograph, I will. It literally the pouch turns into something that looks just like an organ. And it vascularizes and it functions like an organ. So as you have some disease with dysfunctional cells, and now, stem cells can be differentiated into a whole broad array of functional human cells, then there are potentially opportunities for us to explore.
Yep, to tackle so many diseases and conditions, indeed. And in terms of, I guess, just going back to your journey in biotech and the biopharmaceutical space, what keeps you focused, grounded, motivated, and what advice would you have for entrepreneurs and people looking to get into the field? You're like, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And you've done amazing at it.
Oh, thank you. But, people say to me, what keeps you up at night, Jonathan? And I say, nothing. They say, nothing. I say, no, I don't go to bed. So we're very
cut out the sleep. That's the advice.
Yeah, we're very driven, and I personally am the kind of person that's when there's a problem, it drives me to fix it. I quite a few years ago, I went to my endocrinologist and said, "Doctor, I want to start doing triathlons." And she said to me, "Jonathan, don't do that. You'll die. You'll kill yourself. You can't do triathlons as a diabetic." So 11 Ironman triathlons later, I proved it. And, I spent a lot of time racing triathlon to raise children with diabetes. And passion is something you have or you don't have. I love to work with people that are passionate about things. And, without exception, everybody at Sernova is passionate about what they're doing. And any advice I would have to people is, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Always use them in at least that ratio. And, learn from others, learn from what other people do well, learn from their mistakes, learn from your own. And, work with, surround yourself with great teams. And it's quite amazing what mankind has achieved over a relatively short passage of years. And, we're on you're probably a hockey fan living in Toronto. We're on the
Ex-hockey fan, ex.
We're on the stick of the biotech revolution, and it's an exciting place to be.
Absolutely. Jonathan, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I cannot thank you enough for your time today, really. It's so great to hear, again, full circle from both the patient side of things and really the hardcore science and the research that's going behind all of the innovations that you're driving at Sernova.
Well, thank you. And, having folks like yourselves and Xtalks talk about us helps get the message out, raise the awareness, and because of that, we have supportive investors that will move us forward. So it's a win-win outcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you once again. That's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you once again. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.
To join the Xtalks community, visit xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.